After lots of days of negotiations, and on this show, lots of discussion about the negotiations in regard to the debt ceiling, an agreement has now been reached. And we've been talking about how House Republicans were, in the most irresponsible way imaginable, attempting to leverage their power, trying to use the fact that to continue paying the government's bills, we would need to raise the debt ceiling. It's been done countless times, including 3 times under Trump, without this type of debacle taking place. But House Republicans were taking this as an opportunity to leverage the fact that they would need to get on board with a debt ceiling increase to get spending cuts out of Biden and the Democrats. So threatening to crash the economy by not raising the debt ceiling, to get bad policy items. Bad. Both options were bad. And Biden had to make some decisions on that. I think up front, there's a very fair case to be made that he never should have even engaged. He should have ignored these demands and played the most terrifying game of chicken with House Republicans and seen if they were willing to go through with the threat of crashing the economy, because now the precedent has been set that you can use the threat of crashing the economy to leverage for spending cuts like this, leverage for your dream policy items. But within that context, Biden decided to engage because the threat was so significant. And I think there's a case to be made as to why that was reasonable as well. And he ended up getting an agreement that's not as bad as I would have expected, to be honest. You're engaging with Kevin McCarthy, who is the figurehead for the GOP caucus, which is driven and controlled by the MAGA Republicans. And so engaging with that and coming out the other side with an agreement that really is not as significant as the GOP wanted it to be, even though there are bad items, obviously, again, because of who had to be negotiated with, I think is notable for sure. So wherever you land on should have Biden engaged or should he have seen if Republicans were willing to go through with it, up front he said, I'm not going to engage. You can't do this. You can't threaten to crash the economy to get your policy goals through. And then he kind of shifted on that. Wherever you stand on that, I do want to discuss what ended up coming out the other end. I think in principle, Biden should not have engaged. Like I said, now there's a precedent where this can be done. But sometimes the practical reality is too severe, as this one was, at least in the eyes of Biden, to go through with that in principle stand. So with that being said, here's this from USA Today. Just days before a possible default, President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy struck a deal late Saturday to raise the debt ceiling in exchange for caps on future spending and other demands from Republicans. Yet the White House was able to stave off the more sweeping budget cuts the House Republicans pushed in their own legislation while keeping intact the president's signature domestic programs. And setting aside the in principle thing that I was just referencing, the dangerous precedent, it is true, as I've seen a number of commentators point out, that this was going to come up anyways, the budget talks, this type of policy discussion, a debate on these types of funding positions would have had to be negotiated anyways. And so the fact that this is what we're getting is better within the context of that understanding. And so here's just a quick rundown of what's in this agreement. This is just based on reporting. We're not going to see the actual text, or we're not going to see breakdowns of the actual text until that is finished, and it won't actually be voted on in the House until Wednesday is what I was seeing. So it raises the debt ceiling until 2025, obviously. And then it puts spending caps for 2 years. We talked about how they wanted to do discretionary spending caps at 2022, fiscal year 2022 levels, which would have caused cuts to so many programs because of what was done in the fiscal year 2023 budget. And this didn't get 2022 cap on spending. It got 2023, which is a lot better for sure. And so this writes the deal caps annual discretionary spending levels, spending for 2 years, I should have said, keeping non-defense spending levels flat next year and raising it by 1% in 2025. This means that funding for domestic programs across the board besides Social Security and Medicare will stay the same next year. Now, before we continue, I will note again with a Republican-led House, it's not like we were going to get massive increases in spending to these domestic programs from 2023 to 2024. It just wasn't going to happen. And so the fact that they're freezing 2023 and then a 1% increase for the fiscal year 2025 spending, it's just not that bad, even though it's not ideal. But within the context of the GOP as an entity in these negotiations, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. And then work requirement changes for food stamps and other aid. I don't like this. As it writes, the final holdup before Biden and McCarthy secured a deal was a fight over expanded work requirements for welfare programs, which Republicans pushed and the White House resisted. The final agreement overhauls the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, by setting time limits for how long able-bodied adults 54 years old or younger without dependent children can receive food stamps if they do not meet certain work requirements. So what they were going for was bringing the work requirement age up from 50 to 56, I think it was, and they got to 54. But the specifics of what will be changed on that front, a lot of unknowns still at this point in time, and so I'll wait a little bit to see what comes of that. But I don't like that that's being raised from 50 or 49 to 54. But what Biden was able to get in this, as it writes, but in a win for the White House, the deal would expand food benefits for the homeless and veterans, which is really good. And then it claws back some IRS funding, which is an obvious attempt, as I've gone through in the past, for the GOP to allow their wealthy donors to continue cheating out of their taxes, because the extra funding to the IRS that was put forward in the Inflation Reduction Act was a way to go after wealthy tax cheats and get tax dollars we should be getting from those who can absolutely afford to pay the proper amount of taxes, but the IRS needed more resources to do so. And Republicans are saying, no, defund that partially. Now they're only getting it from $10 billion. They're only getting $10 billion out of the $80 billion total increase that was in the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's not completely defunding the program or anything like that, but it's not as significant, and it will allow more tax cheats at the top of our economic ladder than would have been allowed otherwise. And they say they're in favor of cutting the deficit, but it's actually a way in not allowing the IRS to be properly funded. It's allowing us to, or it's causing us to lose money in that deal, because by funding the IRS more, we get more back than we even had to invest. Significantly more, billions we make in profit, if you want to phrase it that way, by funding the IRS, because they get so much back in tax revenue, more than they were ever even funded in the first place. But the talking point of this being an attempt to go after MAGA with the 87,000 IRS agents was so popular, so effective, that this became a sticking point for the GOP. And then it rescinds unspent COVID-19 rescue money. Obviously, no taxes on wealthy individuals or corporations, because the GOP, what do? As I've said before, they try to make the wealthy more wealthy and the powerful more powerful. But as I said previously, it's not like Biden was going to get extra taxes on the wealthy while the House was controlled by Republicans. And then the Inflation Reduction Act and student loan forgiveness are left intact, which is good, because they wanted to go after that. So that's kind of what's in the deal. I'll show you Kevin McCarthy coming out of a meeting or a phone call or something of the sort and making this announcement that an agreement had been reached. In principle, we'll have to see it actually get through the House and Senate, but an agreement has been reached.
I just got off the phone with the president. I talked to him twice today, and after weeks of negotiations, we have come to an agreement in principle. We still have a lot of work to do, but I believe this is an agreement in principle that's worthy of the American people. I expect to finish the writing of the bill, checking with the White House, and speaking to the president again tomorrow afternoon.
The president saying the agreement represents a compromise, which means not everyone gets what they want. That's the responsibility of governing. I strongly urge both chambers to pass the agreement right away. The deal reportedly includes no new taxes, no new government programs, and strengthens welfare work requirements, while also clawing back $29 billion in unspent. And
we just went through the specifics, so you don't need to listen to that any further. based on the response from some within the GOP, it's clear they didn't get what they wanted. I saw Lauren Boebert, Bob Good, and many others saying, I'm not going to vote for this because it's not at all what we wanted. And that's good, I guess. Seeing that response from them is good, is hopeful. As they get more information on it than we have, hopefully there really aren't too many concessions. As I said, the primary negatives as of now that we're aware of when these outlines are kind of broken down just in reporting, it comes down to the increased increased work requirements. That's not good. But for homeless individuals and veterans, they're protected, which was a good thing for the Biden administration to get in the deal. And then the decreased funding to the IRS, again, we're just going to lose money because of that. We're just going to lose the ability to properly get as much tax revenue from those at the top as we should be getting. And some other things as well, but not the massive concessions that House Republicans were saying they were going to get. The scary thing, and you've seen this in any kind of hostage situation type TV show, okay? The scary thing is when someone's willing to follow through with their threat, you're in a lot weaker of a position. So Biden probably started to get the sense that House Republicans may kind of like the idea of causing a bunch of economic hardship so that Biden's reelection bid is hurt. And more and more people started saying, maybe that's the idea. Cause a default, whatever comes of that, a lot of it's going to be blamed on Biden. And so if the other side in a negotiation is not serious when they're saying, hey, we don't want to default, and actually they would be kind of okay with it, or some of them would, or they're more, they're playing fast and loose with it more than you ever would, then that puts you in a weaker negotiating position for sure. So the fact that this is the agreement that came of it, and with the understanding that budget negotiations were going to have to happen anyways with these same individuals, I think is a better outcome, as I said previously, than the one I would have expected. Then here's a little bit from Kevin McCarthy in the aftermath of this news, talking on Fox News Sunday about this.
No vote.
Well, that's okay, because more than 95% of all those in the conference were very excited. But think about this. We finally were able to cut spending. We're the first Congress to vote for cutting spending year over year. So you cut that back, you fully fund the veterans, you fully fund defense, but you take that non-defense spending all the way back lower than 22 levels. Now you get work requirements for TANF and SNAP, where the Democrats said that was a red line. Now you're able to reform NEPA. How frustrating we are. It's been 40 years since you could streamline it. To build a road in America takes you 7 years of review. We now limit that where it's focused, where you can only review it for 1 to 2 years. We're going to get America working again. We get the process working.
Gosh, he really aggravates me. I went through in the past. It is not true that adding work requirements, as he is doing here, effectively puts people back to work who should be working. What it does do is effectively kick people off those programs, purposefully or accidentally, who should be getting those benefits. Luckily, they weren't able to touch Medicaid, which they were wanting to do, which would have been also disastrous. Then I'll show you one of the GOP House members who is a negotiator. This is Representative Dusty Johnson. He's a Republican. He was on State of the Union on CNN with Jake Tapper and got asked about the fact that, as I mentioned, Bob Good is one of the people speaking out and saying, I'm not going to support this. And so he got asked, will you be able to get this deal through?
Votes do you think you're going to get? How many votes can you afford to lose?
We're starting the whipping process now.
Okay.
I have talked to maybe between 2 and 3 dozen Republican members. I have not had a single one of them tell me I can't support that.
Well, I just gave you the names of 3 you can call maybe.
Well,
Buck, Norman, and Good, who might have some thoughts.
I'm not sure having Dusty Johnson call Bob Good is the perfect way to get his vote. But and let's be honest, Bob Good will not vote for this thing. And it doesn't matter if Mother Teresa came back from the dead and called him. He's not voting for it. He was never going to. This is going to pass.
Votes.
I actually agree with that prediction. My prediction here is MAGA Republicans, some of them, will make a big stink. and some of them will vote against it, but you'll have enough Democrats and enough Republicans who end up voting, and it'll get passed. Same thing for the Senate. Even though, as I'll show you here, Pramila Jayapal is also raising the alarm and saying that this is not as good of a deal as should have been reached, or my underlying position, which is there shouldn't have been negotiations in the first place.
It is bad policy. I told the president that directly when he called me last week on Wednesday, that this is saying to poor people and people who are in need that we don't trust them. And the average amount of assistance for SNAP, for example, is $6 a day, Jake. I mean, we're talking about $6 a day. And I think it is really unfortunate that the president opened the door to this. And while at the end of the day, you know, perhaps this will, because of the exemptions, perhaps it will be okay. I can't commit to that. I really don't know. And our caucus, and it's not just the progressives, across the ideological spectrum, including problem solvers, by the way, people feel that this is bad policy. So it's very unfortunate that it's even made its way into the discussion, frankly.
And I totally agree with that. Bad policy for sure. We shouldn't be adding these work requirements. We shouldn't be defunding these important programs, all of that. I'm just trying to put myself in the position of this threat being made, and do you just completely ignore it? It is harder than I think sometimes it's easy to say when we're over here on the sideline going, well, in principle, blah, blah, blah. I agree normally with those arguments, and I agree with her 100% it's bad policy, but we're also dealing with the MAGA Republican Party that is totally great with chaos, and that puts any negotiator in a really bad position, or any leader who is trying to not put us into an economic crisis. It's definitely a difficult situation. So there it is. Really unfortunate that negotiations even happen. Really unfortunate that now there's a precedent that if you make a threat large enough, then you're going to get the Democrats to the table and you can get some concessions. But with the proclamations that came from Kevin McCarthy during both the pre-negotiation and during the negotiation process, I think this deal is a lot better than I would have expected Kevin McCarthy and Republicans to agree to. And so that I guess we can be happy about, but overall enraged that Republicans would choose to get through bad policies, bad spending cuts, with the threat of doing something so horrible like crashing the country's and thus the world's economy. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show hours before all the clips are uploaded to the YouTube channel, plus get access to the exclusive members only bonus show on the weekends, you can do so by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. That is lukebeasleyshow.com/membership, and there's a link in the description.